Come on in a few minutes late. Let me make sure I got everything set up. There you go. Let's get the old caption up. We got to do first things first, the Pledge of Allegiance. You know, I haven't seen my old friend Glenn on here. I hope that Glenn is on here. Some of you folks that were with me on the Periscope when we just did Periscope, especially during the height of the great debacle of 2020. Glenn was on often and reminded us of the Pledge of Allegiance. So let's go ahead and get that done. I think my sound is okay. I hope it is with everybody. I had a little technical difficulty this morning. So let's do it. Let's do the Pledge of Allegiance. Here we go. And join me if you'd like. I appreciate if you'd stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, let's get that away and get back to it here. All right, we got some things to cover. I told you that Joe Biden's speech would be he's a swamp creature of 50 years. He knows how to give a speech. And so I expected all the details to look right, and he read his speech. And what I didn't expect, and I'd mentioned to you that yesterday during the day, the speech would be leaked out in pieces and would be released. They call it prepared for delivery, as prepared for delivery. So you give the speech. If they change it beforehand, then they post the speech afterwards and say as delivered. That's kind of an insider thing that's what they do. And so I told you that Joe Biden would give a workmanlike speech. In 50 years, he's been at a bunch of these. He sat in there and watched them. He's, this is like watching a baseball player who, is been playing for 20 years. You know how to play. You know how to play. You know how to go up to the plate and all. Doesn't mean you get a hit every time, but a ball player that played for 20 years. In this case, Joe Biden played 50 years. You know how to hit the ball. And that's what how the system works in the swamp system. So, in fact, that's a good line, by the way, the swamp system. It's not the swamp is a system that everybody operates in. It's not, it's like an ecosystem, the swamp system. But okay, but Joe Biden, the most outrageous, egregious lie. The good news is they signal, as I told you, what they want you to believe, and the narrative machine goes into overdrive. So hours before the speech, you had the leaking of Joe Biden. He was going to call the January 6th attack the worst attack on democracy since the Civil War. And that was the drama. And of course, they leaked that early, and the narrative machine kicked in. Big tech, big media, big government, and they all started to reinforce the narrative and tell you, oh yeah, that's right. Fact check, CNN's fact check. It's true. Fact check. This is fact check Twitter. Oh yeah, this is true. And on and on and on. Of course, as we know, although there were some lawbreakers, I think mostly trespass is about the only thing that looks like it's a real law breaking on that day. I haven't seen the evidence that hasn't been presented of the things they said, that there's bodily harm, there was assault and battery on officers. We'll see so far. But what the media ran with from January 6th was murder of a cop. Turns out to be false, right? 7 people died. Turns out that 6 people died of natural causes. 1 person was killed by a police officer who shot her. Again, we don't know that guy's name. We don't know the details. We don't know anything. Again, when you break a law, if you're trespassing, it does seem like you can put yourself in harm's way, but being killed seems a bit dramatic. But the media narrative, the narrative machine, all the way over the top. Oh my gosh, insurrection, murderous, armed. No one was armed. Well, let me say that differently. If you think carrying a knife, a pocket knife or a smaller knife is armed, or bear spray is armed, then I guess people were armed. But there's no evidence that the bear spray or anything was used in any way. That wasn't what happened, okay? So here's Joe Biden. He's a liar. Joe Biden is a liar. Like I called him last 2 weeks ago, he's a bigot. The guy's a bigot, and he's a liar. And the fact that he participates so dramatically in this lie, this is the big lie. The big lie is what they're saying happened on January 6th. That's the big lie. The big lie is what the CNN and others. Now there's lots of video clips, by the way, of people have put all together about the big lie, the big January 6th lie. That's the lie. The problem is the narrative machine has spent from January 6th till yesterday, Joe Biden's speech, going forward and hammering into the American people all the details that I just told you. You can list them out. The best source on this is Julie Kelly, who writes over at American Greatness. She writes at the Epoch Times now. Go find Julie Kelly. I think her Twitter handle is @Julie_Kelly2, maybe @Julie. Just search Julie Kelly. And she's written piece after piece on the reality of January 6th and the people involved. And so, but really watch this, because the narrative machine is actually getting ready. It doesn't just make fake news, it makes fake history. And so the narrative machine now, big tech, big media, and big government. Remember, in this case, they needed big government to arrest 75,000 people for the Great Insurrection. That's not the right number, obviously, but hundreds of people arrested for the Great Insurrection. That's big government. And Department of Justice saying all sorts of over-the-top things. And in the court system, judges joining in, all this stuff. Out in normal America, if they saw real coverage of January 6th, they would have said, that's a kind of crazy bunch of characters. They were upset, and I guess they're fired up, and well, that's kind of funny. And they went home. I mean, they went losers. People, they might have even said sore losers. I've never said this before, but I sat in the second row at the Trump speech on the Ellipse on January 6th. I've never said this. When I sat there in the speech, freezing cold, went on too long. I was sitting with Ryan Girdusky. Girdusky. I never pronounce his name right. The writer. And we sat next to each other. I'd never met him before, but I've read his stuff, had him on the radio show. And we spent most of the time talking. It took too long for the speech to start. The speech went on way too long. And it felt like a speech of a guy that had given up, that he knew the game that was over. It didn't sound like a rallying cry at all. At all. It was the opposite. So anyway, but half the country, more than half the country, has heard repeatedly over and over again, in every periodical, in every printed media, on every website, the combination of big government, we arrested everybody, big media, look at these images, pictures of a dead policeman who died of natural causes 2 days later. Laying in rest, laying in the Capitol. Impeachment used to hammer home this great insurrection. All of this was a lie. It's the big lie. And Joe Biden is the big liar. But here's the dirty part. Here's the nasty part. Here's the terrifying part. What they did from January 6th until last night was put together this narrative, weave it together, and then Joe Biden claims it as the president of the United States in the hallowed halls of the greatest democratic republic the world has ever seen. Better than Rome, better than anything. And he stands there in the center of world history, and he lies. The worst attack on democracy since Civil War? Worse than 9/11? I don't know if many of you, if you think about it often. I grew up in New Jersey. I had friends that were in the Twin Towers as it went down. I had people that were working in the Pentagon. I mean, I had friends, people from, we had like 40 people from my high school who died in the 9/11 towers, right? I mean, so I can picture where I was sitting, what I was doing was the towers fell. I can picture the feeling of realizing we were under attack. 9/11? I mean, we're talking about from the Civil War. Pearl Harbor? I mean, John F. Kennedy being assassinated in Dallas with a shot, I mean, this is the insurrection, the so-called insurrection, the January 6th, kind of mild riot, if that's what you want to call it, protest that got out of hand. That's the greatest attack on democracy since the Civil War. He's a liar. And he's lying to try to hammer home the fake history. And they'll write the fake history. Michael Beschloss, who claims to be a presidential historian. And he tweeted immediately after that. I told you what would happen is, remember I told you, big government, big media, big tech, the narrative machine. The big government, the White House, puts out this part of the statement yesterday afternoon where he's going to call it the greatest attack on democracy since the Civil War. Michael Beschloss, historian, big historian, oh wow, presidential historian. He tweets, oh, totally true, amazing, really true, wow. And of course, Twitter and everybody take it, all this Facebook, everybody takes that up and reinforces it. Michael Beschloss, who's been on what? He's on MSNBC 3 times a week, or I think so. I mean, one of the John Meacham was on before I think he got thrown off for, it turns out he was working on the Biden campaign and he was never telling anybody. So, but the point here is the reality of the narrative machine is trying to make it history. And the danger is most of the country, normal Americans, have been going on with their lives. They're going on with their lives. The stock market's going okay. They're worried about their schools. They can't figure out why the schools aren't back in. They can't figure out if fits and starts, all that. And the narrative machine's in overdrive. What a liar. That's the only thing you can say. It's like when I said about Joe Biden. You can say his policies are racist. I think they are, many of them. You can say that they're aimed at only poll tested things that happen, poll tested truths that won't raising taxes on the rich. The rich move. They move their money. And then who gets penalized is entrepreneurs and business people, and the economy drags. I'm not saying, by the way, that the rich shouldn't be taxed. I'm saying if you tax the rich over, say, 50%, which is where the number would be if you add up all the other taxes, it's just crazy. But all those policies are bad. But what he did last night, he's a liar. And he's not just a liar on a small thing. He's a liar on America. He's a liar about what America is about. And he's a liar that puts 74 million, 75 million people who voted for Trump, puts them in that camp. That's what they're doing. They're putting us in a camp. They're trying to say we're in a certain mindset that we should be disrespected, dishonored. It's terrible. It's terrible. I never disliked Joe Biden until last night. I never disliked him as a person. I always thought he was probably shallow and more. That's not fair. He's just part of the swamp system. The swamp system breeds a certain type of character. It softens your spine and weakens your soul, in my opinion, for most people. The people that survive in the swamp are ones that go through adversity generally, and whether it's health or family or whatever. And Biden certainly went through some of that with his family, but I never thought he was. I never disliked him until last night. And then I thought he really is. Maybe he's just a dupe. But there's no way to do more damage to the country than to sit at the center of our history and lie so blatantly. He could have said something about what happened, and he could have said it in a way that was unfortunate. Too many people were stoking false hopes. I don't believe that, but he could say that. And he said, but now we should move forward. He could have said all that. Instead, he lied. And if it's a speechwriter that put the lie in there and he just said it, it's still just as bad. It's terrible. It's a terrible moment. It's a terrible moment. And I did warn you about that. I didn't see that coming. I thought he would talk about the great threat of white supremacy and all that. He didn't. He went for a history bending exercise. These people are really, truly doing evil things to the country. It's really true. It's true now. Anyway, we got some great things happening too, so don't worry about it. We have to count on the Lord and count on making progress every day. So there's lots happening. We will talk again. I got to run. Thanks for tuning in. Sorry about being late. We'll talk again soon. Pass this on to other people, by the way. Share it on social media.